He wanted her coochie that bad that for a moment, they lived in a colorblind world. So here I was coming back from a nice peaceful trip in Japan, only to arrive back to dingy, crusty America with more BS from the book community. I still have not unpacked the boxes in my background. Like, damn, can the book community just give me a second to breathe before they dive into more shenanigans? So what has happened recently involves the romance community, which seems to often be seen at the scene of the crime. It also started on BookTok when people pointed out that there is an author who has a popular book on BookTok, and that book in question seems to be fine, but when they looked into her previous books that she's published, people started to notice that there was this one particular novel that was centered on a forbidden relationship between two people. One of them, our hero, is a member of the KKK. Actually, not just a member, he is the heir of the Texas chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. And his romantic partner, the other main character of this book, is the daughter of the most brutal cartel boss in Mexico. I mean, you really have to commend her for really making sure that this was an enemies to lovers situation. Because most of the time, enemies to lovers really only works in fantasy, and usually when authors try to fit it into like a contemporary setting, it doesn't quite work because usually they're just like workplace rivals or something trivial like that. This is truly enemies to lovers because your love interest will literally hate crime you. When I read about the situation, I wasn't sure if I would be making a video about it because it seemed kind of redundant. A white person in the book community showing their ass isn't really anything new or groundbreaking. If you ask someone in the romance book community if they have heard about the book where the love interest is a Nazi, they would probably be asking you, which one? But then I wondered, why is this so common? Because there are truly so many incidents of this happening where there is a romantic relationship depicted in the book between a conservative / racist white person versus either a liberal person or a person of color, and their relationship is supposed to be showing how love conquers all, I guess. As I thought more about it, I felt like maybe this pattern was worth discussing. I want to talk about examples of books like these that I have seen and what the implications mean for this to be a reoccurring pattern. However, since she is the catalyst for this video being made in the first place, we will dive into her situation first, because I'm sure for those of you who aren't on BookTok, you might want to know the tea. So to give you some background information, Tillie Cole is an author who is most known for a novel that was a big hit on BookTok. It's called 1,000 Boy Kisses. I haven't seen any scrutiny for that in particular, and when I looked it up, I actually saw that Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things praising the book in an interview. So she is pretty well known within the BookTok romance community. I think also some or most of her books are self-published, and so the fact that she, had a really big actress and a lot of people on BookTok reading her books, that's a pretty big deal. What has stirred up the controversy is that people on BookTok started digging into some of her previous works, and there is this one book called Darkness Embraced. It was published in 2019, and this falls under the category of a dark romance book. Darkness Embraced is actually the 7th book of this entire series that she is writing. The series is called the Hades Hangman series. The love interests in these books are motorcycle gang type of dudes, basically like bad boys. And really, what could be even more bad than having your man be from the KKK? So it's one of those romance series where every book you follow a different couple. So in this 7th book, you follow this guy who is the heir of the KKK and the main girl who is the daughter of a Mexican cartel drug lord. However, there are 2 other books in her series. One of them is called Beauty Found, the other is called Damnable Grace. The characters in those series also have ties to the KKK, but it's just this guy in the 7th book is like the main player here. He's the star of the whole club they got going on. So I'm gonna read to you the synopsis of the book. The deepest love can be born from the fiercest hate. Born to sit on opposing thrones, they were never meant to fall. Tanner Ayers is the heir of the Texas Ku Klux Klan. By the way, I like that he is specifically from the Texas chapter of his organization, because they were like, you know, it's not enough that he is the heir to this little group, but it has to also be based in Texas, just for like maximum effect, you know? Fed nothing but hate, violence, and intolerance from the day he was born, Tanner kills for his cause without remorse until he meets Adelita Quintana, the daughter of the most brutal cartel boss in Mexico. Adelita and Tanner hate each other instantly, but there is something between them that neither can explain or deny. Hate turns to desire, desire turns to love, and for the first time, Tanner sees how wrong his whole life has been. For years, Tanner does everything he can to find a way for him and Adelita. He walks away from the clan, his family, everything he ever believed, and joins the Hades hangmen. But now the hangmen are at war, not only with his own family, but with Adelita's too. When Adelita and Tanner are thrown together again, they are forced to fight for a love that should never have been, for a love that puts them and everyone they have ever loved in danger. The White Prince, the cartel princess, and a future that seems shrouded in darkness. ... Dark contemporary romance contains sexual situations, violence, sensitive and taboo subjects, offensive language, and mature topics. Recommended for age 18 years and up. I like how the synopsis basically pits these two people by their titles, the cartel princess and the White Prince. Literally white with a capital W. You might as well just put the white fist on the book cover. I also find it funny that the moment I mention White Prince, the police sirens are blaring outside of my window. The police are ready to come pick up their man. Anyway, based on the synopsis, it seems that he's not in the KKK the whole time. Actually, he leaves the organization because he fell in love with a woman of color. And it sounds like the gang that he joins, which is like the gang that we follow throughout the series, is actively against the KKK. If I had to guess what the author was thinking, she probably thought it's okay for me to put this hate group in my novels because the main characters are not going to be staying in this group and they're going to be making the decision to leave that group, which arguably could be a very noble thing to do because you're essentially leaving everything that you've ever learned and unlearning the hate that you grew up with. I'm not against this in theory. For example, one of the books that I have really enjoyed within the past few years is All the Light We Cannot See. This one was a historical World War II novel where the main character had been one of the guys that joined the Nazis, but he joined it not because he felt any particular hatred, but more so because it was just a very normal thing for young boys of that time and in Germany to be indoctrinated into the Hitler Youth Group. And in the book, we see him question the propaganda that is so insidious around him and try to break out of that. But I think what makes that book different from this one in particular is the language that's being used in this book that is just filled with a lot of racist dialogue, a lot of anti-Semitic expressions, and it's used in a way that it seems to be more irresponsible rather than actually showing proper character development. Now, I truly believe the author probably thought she was showing character development with this guy deciding to leave his hate group and deciding to be with his Latina queen, but from the criticisms I've seen of it, it does not seem like it was very well done. But then again, before this book even stirred up controversy, the original ratings on Goodreads was over 4 stars. So people were actually eating this up. So does that mean that it was a good book with nuanced takes and proper character development, and it's about unlearning hate and embracing love and not hate criming the Latina woman that you fell for instead? That is not going to be the relevant question here for this video. My question that I want to ask for this video is whether books like these are good or not. Why do they keep on being written? But before we get into that discussion and before I read some of the excerpts from this book and the apology that the author wrote and list out some other examples of books that follow this pattern, I believe that as a woman of color who is about to do a bunch of mental labor to explain the institution institution of white supremacy, I should at least be compensated for this. And so that's why I'm glad for the sponsor of today's video. This video has been sponsored by Endel. If you are like me, you might have trouble focusing on things that you need to do in your day-to-day life, or even just relaxing in general because you get so swept up of the horrors around you. Is that just me or no? Okay, to a lesser degree, maybe you just need help falling asleep. Endel is a really great app for you to use because it is environment-based. You get these real-time personalized soundscapes that are meant for you to relax or to help you focus or to fall asleep. And I know a lot of the people who are watching my videos deal with ADHD, and I am calling you out directly here. What I like to do is select deep work because this is where I can actually select how long I want to focus on a task before I get a break. And that's just perfect for managing my to-do list. And they even have one for reading too. And I know a lot of my friends deal with this too, where we'll try to read a page and then we'll just check social media instead. Again, really like that this has so many different scenarios that are very specific to my day-to-day struggles. And I'll have the link in my description below. The first 100 people who click on it and download Endel will get a free week of audio experiences. So that's a way for you to just try it out and see if you like it or not. Now let's get back to the video. All right, so let's dive further into Darkness Embrace and read out loud a few of the excerpts. Here's a page from when the main girl recalls making out with this dude and she feels very conflicted by him because they are star-crossed lovers. I placed my hand on his cheek and, needing some sense of self-preservation, said, "You leave tomorrow." Tanner looked away across the room at nothing, then nodded. "I am Mexican. You are KKK. You know we cannot mix." Tanner gritted his teeth, but he nodded again. "Our fathers would kill us if they knew." His expression was furious. I wasn't sure if it was at the truth, my words, or the fact that he was here, willingly touching and sleeping with a woman from what he deemed an inferior race. "Tonight," I whispered, my voice shaking at the fact that I was stupidly going to allow this again. "All we have is tonight, in this room. Tomorrow you'll be gone, and when our paths cross again, they will be for business only. That should give you enough time to forget you ever betrayed your race for one night with me." Here's another page where this girl is just constantly agonizing over making out with this dude. As you should, girl. Like, let's stand up here, okay? "I would be a chink in the clan knight's armor." Wait a minute, chink? Is there another layer to this racism we're uncovering? I'm just kidding. I just felt left out and I wanted to feel included, you know? "One he could never repair. It gave me a sick kind of pleasure to know that I, a Mexican woman, had weakened him enough to abandon his beliefs and take me. That once hadn't been enough. But the truth was, ... I wanted him, titles and families aside. Right now, I want this man." Tanner Ayers fucked me knowing exactly what that night was. The only night a white prince and cartel princess could have each other. No race, no culture, no hate, no business. Just two bodies joining us one. I like how that last paragraph is basically saying that they were so horny that they forgot racism. She wanted the dick so bad, and he wanted her coochie that bad that for a moment they lived in a colorblind world. There are a few pages where you see a lot of slurs and derogatory language. This is coming from the main guy's dad, who is enraged that he's in a relationship with a Latina hottie. "You ever speak to another dirty fucking redacted again and I'll kill you, boy. You're white. You're the future white prince, and I won't have you associating with anyone who is beneath you, beneath us. We, the good Christian white parents, don't pay a fucking fortune to have them let in polluted blood, giving you children bullshit ideas about equality." And then he beats up the main guy. So this is where we see, you know, the main guy obviously has grown up with a lot of hate and abuse, and that was how he was taught to be racist to other people, because his dad is literally like, "If you don't use a slur every 5 seconds, I will beat your ass." So this tragic background story is why he was thrust upon the very burdensome role of the white prince of the KKK. It really goes to show that, you know, we all go through our own issues and that hate is learned. And I'm really glad that we are exploring these really thought-provoking themes in such a well-written book. You can tell it's well-written because it just explains everything to you on the page. It doesn't leave any room for like nuance or interpretation. It just flat out tells you everything, slurs and all. There's this one scene where they're talking about how beautiful this white lady that they see is. Fucking beautiful, darling. Pure Aryan too. Blonde hair and blue eyes, Hitler's fucking ideal bitch. A Clan Brothers living wet dream. Hell, if I weren't been paid a bucket load of cash to deliver you unharmed to those freaks in bumfuck nowhere, I'd be taking you back to the ranch with me, showing you what it's like to be fucked by the pure race. And then I'm gonna share 2 other screenshots, but I'm not gonna read it just because if I did try to read it, but like avoid the slurs, it would just be like a few phrases. So you can use your eyes and get the point. Due to the backlash that happens on social media, the author posts an apology on Instagram and turns the comments off for that apology. I deeply apologize to those I have hurt. I have taken the Hades Hangman series down from sale. I am always learning as an author, and I have taken this to heart and will be mindful of all my stories going forward. I endeavor to always try and do better. For now, I am taking some time away from social media. Thank you to all who have supported me and shown me love. I appreciate you more than you know. Sincerely, Tillie Cole. I am not gonna get into whether this was like a good apology or not, and I'm not also gonna get into whether this book had any merit or like had good writing or not, because I don't think that is relevant. I'm more interested in the implications of why a book like this is being published in the first place and why it has an audience of people who enjoy this book enough to give it an average rating of over 4 stars on Goodreads, and enough to actually defend this author even after she has taken a break from social media to lick her wounds. I want to read a few tweets that I saw of people defending the author when others have called her out for using racist and anti-Semitic language. Hi, I see you don't read a lot of dark romance. There are a lot of topics others find horrifying. It's best to read trigger warnings, and if those things trigger or offend you, don't read it. Just because you're offended doesn't mean you need to blast an author. There's another tweet where this person has gathered a few Facebook comments from people who are not happy with this author being temporarily chased off of social media. First, the indie authors being called not really authors, and now silencing dark romance. I find it very hypocritical for people in these types of groups to jump on this bandwagon. Readers happily devour books about characters who participate in kidnapping, stalking, torture, murder, non-con, dub-con, and even grape. I'm gonna say grape just in case YouTube tries to take down this video. Listen, if a YouTube moderator is watching this is a discussion video for educational purposes, okay? For example, it is very enlightening that this person says, don't get me started on taboo stuff. I mean, a character can literally rail his own grandmother and people say, don't ick someone else's yum. Now, hold on. Since when did people say that as a response to someone railing their own grandmother? Has that always been the response with finding that out? Like, damn, I can't believe you banged your grandma, but you know what? I'm not gonna ick someone else's yum. Anyway, the person says, the anti-hero flag flies high among dark romance readers, and he is celebrated when there is even a sliver of redemption. Well, calling a KKK member an anti-hero is a choice, but actually applying any kind of book tropes like anti-hero, enemies to lovers, dark romance in the context of a person belonging to a real life hate group is one of those interesting things that I'm seeing in this pattern of romance books that are about these kinds of relationships. But we'll get into that soon. This commenter says a lot of stuff about how the author is a great writer. I mean, there really is a reader out there for everyone. That's all I'm getting from this comment. They say at the very end, my point is you can pick and choose what you read, but if you take a moral high ground on one subject but say don't kink shame or shame people for reading certain plots or genres, you're essentially being hypocritical. So it's interesting that this person is saying that to denounce a book where the love interest is a person from a violent hate group is kink shaming. Is it even accurate to call it a kink, or is that just you being racist? There was another screenshot that I saw the other day when I was trying to piece together this stuff, and I did not take a screenshot of this, so I can't find it anymore. There was a commenter that was comparing the author being canceled to the author dealing with lynching, and the irony of that is not lost upon me. The only screenshot that I was able to find is a response to that person. So on that note, I want to point out that this person wrote, Tillie Cole is British, like me. We are the most welcoming people. Why do people look for things that aren't there? It's a cancel culture. It isn't racism. My uncle is Muslim. Even he said people post things for life. You aren't fighting racism. You're doing the opposite. Oh, the author is British? Okay, never mind then. We can just call off the pitchforks right now. It is totally okay for this lady to write about a hero who is from the KKK because she's British. She's not American. She's from a place that has never been built on any racist institution at all. So that totally absolves her of anything, because after all, the British are the most welcoming people. Also, this random girl's uncle is Muslim, so you know, anything's fair now. So a common excuse that I see throughout these comments is that people are overreacting or criticizing something that they shouldn't even be poking their nose around in the first place because this is a dark romance book. So to provide some context for people who aren't familiar with the subgenre, this is a subgenre within the romance umbrella that has grown a lot of popularity, especially from BookTok. And this is typically a category that embraces taboo topics. It'll dive into kinks and themes that are very adult, just stuff that usually the mainstream romance genre is too shy to really get into. So this could be stuff like BDSM, abduction fantasies. It can have a very gray area when it comes to consent. I do not think that dark romance is something that should be denounced, because I think part of fiction is exploring a lot of things about humanity, even the sides of humanity that aren't so morally great. But I also believe that just because something is dark romance doesn't mean that it is exempt from criticism. I also believe that racism is not dark romance. Like, we're talking about some girlie getting choked out by a hot dude, not being actively oppressed by a dude who's wearing a white hood. I think it's interesting that this excuse is being used to justify publishing stories where the heroes are white supremacists and equated to book banning, because book banning is actually something that conservatives are responsible for, because it's a way to make sure that people aren't educated about, you know, having basic rights. And so not only are they comparing it to book banning, they're also comparing it to censorship. And this is a common argument that people make whenever it comes to hate speech. People who engage in hate speech say that they should be allowed to say a slur or make derogatory comments about a race or any other kind of minority group because of free speech. And if you say that they shouldn't say it, that's censorship. These are common talking points that we have seen people make in the real world when they're justifying racist institutions. Except now the new Trojan Horse is the dark romance genre. You can't say that I can't write about a racist KKK man, because that's silencing the dark romance genre. I've said this in my other discussion videos before, but my belief is that no one should be banned from writing anything. And Tillie Cole isn't banned, technically speaking. No bookstores or libraries have taken her books off the shelf. Amazon never removed her listing. She did that on her own due to social media backlash. And that's different from being banned. You really can write anything you want. But when you choose to write about something controversial, like something that is deeply rooted in a racist institution and violent history, you have to be prepared to stand up for that creative decision and deal with the criticisms that come with it. Not take a break from Instagram and say that you are continuing to learn. What do you mean you're continuing to learn? You're a grown-ass woman. You made this choice. This didn't come out of thin air. There was a reason why you decided to write a romantic relationship between a man from the KKK and a woman of color. Here's the thing. I also believe that including the KKK in your story doesn't necessarily mean it's a problematic story. What makes it problematic is your portrayal of that group in a way that doesn't actually address the racism and the harmful impact that this group has made and the pain that they have caused for so many people. So for me, it's not even a matter of who gets to write stories and what kind of stories are you allowed to write or what you shouldn't write. For me, it's more like, how do we make sure there's responsible storytelling that's nuanced and thoughtful and doesn't promote a very dangerous ideology? You can make stories that are taboo while also promoting those dangerous ideologies. ideologies or using stereotypes. Those things don't come hand in hand. And maybe you might not actually give a shit about these things to be careful about it, but even if you didn't give a shit about what offended people think and what the snowflakes are clutching their pearls over, even from a craft standpoint, just practicing careful and nuanced storytelling would make you a better writer. But time and time again, we have seen not only these stories get written, but even get awards and public recognition for it, like in a positive way, not just in a social media backlash kind of way. So to pull up some examples for you, there is a book that came out in 2021 that received the Vivian Awards. And the Vivian Awards is the biggest honor that a romance author could arguably get. These awards are meant to recognize excellence in romance books and showcase authors in that genre. So in 2021, they declared the winner for this award to a particular book called At Love's Command. This is a historical romance between a Confederate officer who participated in the massacre at Wounded Knee. And for those of you who don't live in the US or might not be familiar with American history, it's basically this battle where almost 300 Lakota people were shot and killed by soldiers of the United States Army. The US has had a very long history of murdering indigenous people and stealing their land and dehumanizing them in so many ways. So the main guy of this book was a captain at the massacre, and not only was he literally involved in genocide, he was motivated to be a part of this in the first place because he found out his parents and baby sister were murdered by an indigenous war party. This book was categorized under historical inspirational romance, and the category that it won in was romance with religious or spiritual elements. But what's interesting is that every single nominee in that category were all Christian as well. There were no other faiths that were represented in this kind of award category. So I think it's interesting to look at these different subgenres of romance and how they can be so wildly different from each other. You have dark romance in one corner and Christian romance in the opposite corner, and yet they have this common thread that's tying them together, which is that authors in those subgenres think that they can get away with writing a hero who either supports or actively participates in the genocide of people who don't share his skin color. So to say that the issue of white supremacy is something that belongs to the dark romance genre wouldn't actually be correct, because a very popular genre as well is the Christian romance genre. If we go back in 2015, there is another Christian book that had been the finalist for the Best Inspirational Romance Rita Award. The Rita Award was the most prominent award for English language romance fiction from 1990 to 2019, and is presented by the Romance Writers of America. So this is a huge deal for you to even be a finalist in the first place. The finalist in question here is a book called For Such a Time. This is about a hero who was a commandant at a Nazi concentration camp who ends up falling for one of his prisoners who is a Jewish woman. And at the end of the novel, when they get their happily ever afters, they both convert to Christianity as a way to, I guess, show their character development and how they have unlearned hate and are now gonna be better humans from now on. So this book was shortlisted for 2 prizes in the Romance Writers of America's annual awards. One of it was Best First Book, and then the other was Best Inspirational Romance. Okay, so obviously I don't have time to summarize the synopsis of every single romance novel featuring a Nazi out there, but if you just do like a quick Google search, there are so many. And there are even lists on Goodreads that feature romances with German soldiers. This is a very extensive list. I've actually read some of these. Number 10, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I enjoyed that one, except that one like wasn't really a romance book. It was a historical novel. There was like a little bit of a romance going on, and yes, unfortunately, it was with a German soldier. Even at number 19, All the Light We Cannot See, again, I read this book. I really enjoyed it. It's not a romance book, but there is a very, very, very light implied romance where, like I mentioned before, the main character is a Nazi who did end up leaving because he was questioning the propaganda. But again, just looking at this whole list here, yeah, I can explain all the little intricacies about like why this book is slightly different or maybe is not as bad. But the fact of the matter is, when you don't look at it from individual cases and you really look at this list as a whole, why are there so fucking many of them, you know? And these these are not old books either. The latest book that I can think of was actually from an author who tweeted back in 2022 that she got a publishing deal for a historical novel about a secret relationship between a young woman and a German soldier. So yes, this is very much happening on a regular basis. But then we also have some less extreme examples as well. These are examples of enemies to lovers relationships, but more so with political affiliation. However, I would argue that certain political affiliations very much are entrenched within racism. Meet You in the Middle is a romance between a liberal woman and a conservative man. The Stars and Stripes Between Us is about a liberal man and a conservative woman. Even when there are books that aren't strictly romance, like their main genre is fantasy or historical or something else, if there is a romance subplot or a romantic relationship featured, that romantic relationship can have similar themes to that enemies to lovers dynamic, where they're enemies because one person belongs to a group that actively oppresses the other group. A very popular young adult book that I have rated 5 stars is Six of Crows. Because it's a fantasy series, the characters' versions of race isn't really the same as like our race in real life, and the romance between two of the characters, Nina and Matthias, is between a woman who is a Grisha, meaning that she has magical capabilities, and Matthias, who is a soldier whose people actively go out to kill the Grisha because they believe that the Grisha are witches and that their powers are unnatural. Matthias comes from people who have very conservative values. They believe that women should be providers for families and childbearers. A lot of them are blonde and light-skinned. So while he isn't technically a white supremacist, I don't think it is that much of a stretch to see the parallels between how his people killing a group of other people that they deem to be witches or monsters or unnatural creatures isn't really that different from white supremacists. And this is not to say that all of the books that I just listed are horrible books that need to be canceled. I enjoyed reading about Nina and Matthias and their relationship, and I even enjoyed Matthias's character development. The reason why I bring up all of these books, whether they are a direct correlation to white supremacy or even paralleling it like in a fantasy book, is because I want to point out how this is so normalized to the point where even I, an avid reader, and your stereotypical SJW snowflake looking bitch can even enjoy these kinds of stories. But what I want to ask in this video is that why do we keep on seeing this pattern of characters who come from racist institutions, and why is it that every time these characters are humanized, it's almost always from a romantic relationship with a person in the group that they are oppressing or that they don't believe deserve rights? If reading is just for escapism, why is it that our escapism keeps involving giving people from racist institutions another chance over and over again? An argument that you could make is that these stories have merit because they show that everyone is capable of change and becoming a better person and unlearning hate. Everyone is worthy of redemption no matter how deeply they were indoctrinated into their hate group. In theory, I do like the idea of that, but there's something insidious about why these redemption arcs almost always involve being in a relationship with someone that they would have hate crimes otherwise. In the case of For Such a Time, which again is categorized as a historical inspirational romance, again, the hero in this book was a Nazi who literally participated in concentration camps. He belongs to a group of people who, during the Holocaust, killed over 6 million Jewish people and killed over 17 million people in total. But in this book, this Nazi is still redeemed and forgiven despite his participation in this genocide. This attempt to redeem or forgive a Nazi undercuts the severities of the Holocaust, just like how redeeming or forgiving someone in the KKK undercuts all the horrible, violent crimes that they have made against Black people. But what raises the red flags for me in For Such a Time is that part of the happily ever after and part of the romantic relationship that happens between these two characters, the Nazi and the Jewish woman, is that they both convert to Christianity. And seeing that in fiction is a direct parallel to real life, where forced conversions were a thing for many Jewish people during the Holocaust and even afterward. You have removed this Jewish woman's agency and you have made her convert to Christianity because that's the only way for her to have a happy ending. How is that different from the actual suffering that real life Jewish people have had throughout history? Or is it different because we're calling it an inspirational romance? The problem with these redemption arcs is that the solutions are so shallow. You have these stories that have won awards or have been close to winning awards, showing a bad person no longer being bad because all they had to do is believe in Jesus. And if it's not finding redemption through Jesus, it's finding redemption through some good coochie. There's this trend here where the burden of saving the white supremacist or the Nazi or the conservative who has racist beliefs or whatever, that burden always falls upon the person who is a victim of that oppressive group. This power imbalance isn't something that only exists in fiction. It's what we see in real life too. We have shows like 90 Day Fiancé where racist white men marry women of color from poorer countries and are able to fetishize them, demean them, and exploit them. But strangely, when it comes to fiction, we can reframe this situation as a person of color saving their oppressor rather than being taken advantage of. All of this falls under a very common romance trope, which is the happily ever after. And this is something that is very convenient for white supremacy. Instead of working against an institutional problem, you can instead write a story that shows, see, not all slave owners were bad, not all Nazis were evil, not all white people were terrible. You take these individual cases and wrap it up in this pretty little book cover and continue to sweep the bigger systemic issue under the rug. Because now you have a reframed narrative that works in the favor of a particular group. It's co-opting the idea of happily ever afters, of redemption arcs, of the idea of how love can heal you as a person and make you a better person. Taking all these wonderful ideas and letting white supremacy slide in there. And if you point that out and criticize that, you're censoring books. You're silencing the dark romance genre. You're lynching the authors for their creative ideas. You're just trying to participate in cancel culture. But here's my crazy ass theory here. These ideas don't come out of thin air. They are planted in your head for a reason, and they benefit a certain group of people for a reason. And what is more appropriate for setting these ideas than an industry as white as publishing? I have talked about this in previous discussion videos before, and I have shown statistics on why publishing is heavily dominant by white people, whether that is the authors that are getting their books published, or the agents who are signing these authors, or just the employees that are in those big 5 publishing companies. The stats are there. I'm not going to repeat myself. Google is free. This is an industry that chooses what to publish and chooses what books to market as well. So obviously, when they are predominated by a certain group of people, many of the decisions will benefit those group of people. And I'm not saying that this is done on purpose, that this is like some evil mastermind plan, but I do think a lot of this is subconscious bias. And it's interesting when we see this specifically with the romance genre, because when you look at these award groups like the Romance Writers of America, they are a prestigious writers association. However, the group has been majority white. So some new stats that I found is that in 2019, more than 80% of its members are white. But maybe that shouldn't be a surprise because even the romance genre itself is largely white. So for example, at the end of 2019, there was an author and chair of the RWA's ethics committee, Courtney Milan, who is Chinese American. When she was on the committee, she called out a lot of racist books. And because of that, the board decided to suspend her and they decided to ban her from ever holding a leadership position in their organization. So we see how this has affected prestigious institutions. But today, social media is a huge way to promote a book and ensure that it gets a lot of sales and basically puts it up on the bestseller list. And by social media, I'm talking about BookTok specifically. BookTok has the power to make a book an instant success. That's also why you might see authors or books pop out of nowhere because they gain traction from the platform. These are authors that will have their careers change so dramatically where their books will be on the bestsellers list, their future book deals will be 6 or 7 figures, and they'll get movie contracts that will make headlines across a bunch of news outlets. It's a really big deal. However, if you look at the authors that have found their success from BookTok, almost every author on there is white. And the authors who are people of color who have had their success from there are almost always light-skinned and conventionally attractive. And this is all thanks to the algorithm. algorithm. There are so many articles that you can find online about how most algorithms are inherently racist. And TikTok in particular is a unique echo chamber because it is a platform that doesn't necessarily encourage you to introduce something new to their platform, but instead encourages you to jump on something that's already popular in order for you to gain traction. That's why when you glance at BookTok, just from like the surface level, what they recommend is pretty much like the same group of books that you see over and over. The hashtags are the same, the authors are the same, Colleen Hoover, Sarah J. Maas. Their books would be talked about constantly over others. And this is a result of both the algorithm and white readers who are eating the shit up and talking about it and feeding more into the algorithm. So the racial bias that we're seeing here and the prevalence of upholding white voices over others is pretty much everywhere. It's on BookTok, it's in the publishing industry, from the agents to the editors to the authors. And in the enemies to lovers romances, there will be a white person who may have a questionably racist background, but they will be redeemed anyway because it turns out they're not such a bad guy after all. But that's just my opinion. Who knows? Maybe I'll meet a racist white man that will help me change my ways, and maybe I'll go through my own redemption arc where I don't demonize white people after all. So until then, I will see you next time unless you unsubscribe. So goodbye.
Skip class in the parking lot, smoking with your friends. Girl, I know we don't talk a lot.